Is the United States government in possession of crashed UFO wreckage, vehicles from other planets? A bombshell New York Times story just out. Welcome to the Paranormal Post. I'm Clayton Morris. If you like mysteries, you like unsolved stories, and you love UFOs, please subscribe to the channel and hit that little bell notification so you're notified when we release a new video. One of the big stories that we are covering for you here on the show is this bombshell report from the New York Times. Now, reporter Leslie Kane, who's a friend of mine, has been interviewed by me a number of times. She is one of the reporters on this story, and she, along with other reporters at the New York Times, have been sniffing around on this story for years, trying to get to the heart of what the U.S. government has in its possession. Do we have in our possession crashed UFO wreckage? Wreckage that is not of this planet, wreckage that is not from China, not from Russia, otherworldly. In fact, those terms show up prominently in this article, that the U.S. government has otherworldly vehicles in its possession, crashed UFOs that we've been studying under a clandestine program. Senator Harry Reid is featured prominently in this New York Times piece. He was the former Senate Majority Leader. He said, and I quote, "I believe that crashes of objects of unknown origin may have occurred, and that retrieved materials should be studied." Among the other big revelations in this article is that the U.S. government has this information and they are going to start releasing it to the public over the next few months. Amazing. The U.S. government is going to come forward and release otherworldly materials to the United States population, so we might find out once and for all what is inside the government vaults. Before we dive deeper into this story, it's worth noting how we got here. And we want to look at some context here from a previous New York Times story from 2017. That's when the UFO world was turned upside down, when the New York Times, the paper of record, released their amazing story about the secret government UFO programs that were allowed to continue without anyone knowing about them well after the government programs we knew about had ended years ago. Senator Harry Reid was featured prominently in that piece. Luis Elizondo and others came forward to talk about the secret black money that was being used to study UFOs. Of course, released simultaneously was this remarkable footage caught on camera from U.S. Navy pilots off the coast of California, off the USS Nimitz. U.S. Navy pilots who caught a weird tic-tac shaped object. These might not be otherworldly craft, but they might be something boring but very dangerous, like a craft from China or Russia. These craft, of course, were first investigated by that secret, mysterious black ops program that was funneling $22 million of black money for UFO research unbeknownst to the American populace. David Sarita, who's studied these tapes, studied zero-point energies for many, many decades, over 40 years, has analyzed these tapes. He says that people have tried to compare these craft to drones. I've seen those comments as well, that these are simply drones. He says there's nothing on Earth that could move at this rate of speed, 60,000 miles per second. When David Sarita analyzed these videos in frame-by-frame succession, he saw what looked like to be two monopoles that emerged as a result using some sort of incredible gravitational force, almost like a vortex spiral structure that propelled these objects. Nothing like that exists on Earth, folks. The reason that this information comports with what we know from the U.S. Navy pilots, because one of the Navy pilots, Sean Cahill, says he saw one of these craft disappear into what looked like a vortex. That happened near the coast of Baja, Mexico. What's so stunning about the vortex seen over Baja, Mexico, is that it lines up perfectly around the world with the Great Pyramids. Again, I spoke to an F-18 Marine pilot, one of the highly decorated Marine pilots in the world. He said the human body would be ripped apart trying to move at speeds like that. He said that's why exactly when we fly in a shuttle, we lay backwards in a space shuttle, because the human body in the chest can handle those G-forces. Turn to the side, we'd be ripped apart. Now imagine tripling, quadrupling that speed, going well beyond what we have in a shuttle takeoff. The human body would be disintegrated at those speeds.
Booster ignition and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery, returning to the space station, paving the way for future missions beyond.
Just a few months ago, the U.S. Navy did come out and acknowledge that these UFOs are in fact real. The videos that they captured are real, they are authentic, and according to sources, there are additional pilot camera videos that are set to come out and will be released. Now, let's go back to the story, the latest New York Times bombshell story written by Ralph Blumenthal and my friend Leslie Kean. For her part, Leslie Kean, one of the reporters on this story, I know very well. She's an excellent journalist, and she does impeccable research with high-level members of the military, government officials. She has incredible sources, and when she gets her stamp of approval on a story, you know you can count on the veracity of the facts that are in this story. So let's start at the beginning here. You know, the Pentagon says they disbanded their once covert UFO program. That turns out that's not the case. It's continued unabated since then. Despite the fact they told us it was disbanded, it hasn't been. It's now been tucked away very quietly inside the Office of Naval Intelligence, where they're still analyzing UFOs. This task force is called the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force, and it's meant to standardize the collection of reporting. So if the Navy sees something, or the CIA sees something, or the Marines see something, they can standardize all of this information so we have a central database of unidentified aerial phenomenon. Wow. They're not being told to ignore it anymore or you're going to lose your job. And the best part is that some of this information will be released to the public. In fact, some of it will be released about 180 days after the Intelligence Authorization Act has been approved. The piece talks about former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, who was intimately involved in the creation of this task force. His goal is to see what otherworldly objects we have in our possession or we can analyze, but also to make sure that we're safe here at home against other craft that we might not know about, that we might not have analyzed or have any record of from China or Russia or North Korea or Iran. Senator Marco Rubio spoke out about this and said, look, I hope there's some boring explanation to it. It might not be otherworldly, but they might be from China or Iran, and we want to make sure that we have our handle on that. Listen to the senator.
No, look, here's the interesting thing for me about all this, and the reason why I think it's an important topic, okay? And that is we have things flying over our military bases and places where we're conducting military exercises, and we don't know what it is, and it isn't ours. So that's a legitimate question to ask. I would say that, frankly, that if it's something of outside this planet, that might actually be better than the fact that we've seen some technological leap on behalf of the Chinese or the Russians or some other adversary that allows them to conduct this sort of activity. But the bottom line is, if there are things flying over your military bases and you don't know what they are because they're not yours, and they exhibit potentially technologies that you don't have at your own disposal, that to me is a national security risk and one that we should be looking into.
Senator Rubio also in this story talked about how these UFOs, these UAPs, have been sighted over U.S. Air Force and nuclear bases and showed technology that we don't have in the American arsenal. Greatest country in the world, greatest military in the world. Do you think that China or Russia has craft that can travel at 60,000 miles a second, can stop on a dime?
There is someone flying in the airspace that no one else is allowed to fly in, and we don't know who it is, and it isn't something we have. We need to know what that is. I mean, that's in my mind, I don't understand why we wouldn't want to know what it is. Maybe there's a completely sort of boring explanation for it, but we need to find out. And so that's really what we're asking about. And we're asking them to make public as much as possible that information. None of that really fits into the mold of classified per se.
It's no secret that the Pentagon basically lied. They said in 2012 that the former program that studied UAPs had dried up, that the $22 million was done. We're not doing it anymore. Well, now we know that that's not the case, and it continues unabated to this day. So imagine that, the government lied to us. Another revelation in this piece is that members of this task force had been asked to analyze these materials, and they are convinced that many of these materials are not of this world, that may have been recovered from otherworldly vehicles. Also in this piece is the fact that the Pentagon has been holding clandestine meetings with members of Congress and other high-ranking members of the U.S. government to brief them on these materials and these UAPs. So, is it any wonder when President Trump is asked just recently by Don Jr. in that Father's Day video they recorded, he asked him specifically about UFOs, Roswell, and President Trump said some very interesting things in his response.
Before you leave office, will you let us know if there's aliens? Because this is the only thing I really want to know. I want to know what's going on. Would you ever open up Roswell and let us know what's really going on there?
So many people ask me that question.
I know, it sounds almost ridiculous, but it's actually the real question I want to know.
It sounds like a cute question, but it's actually, there are millions and millions of people that want to go there, that want to see it. I won't talk to you about what I know about it, but it's very interesting. But Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
So you're saying you may declassify?
No.
You'll take it?
Well, I'll have to think about that one, right? I'll have to think.
And then you have Senator Harry Reid, also featured in this piece, who says, and I quote, "After looking into this, I came to the conclusion that there were reports, some were substantive, some not so substantive, that there were actual materials that the government and the private sector had in their possession." Eric W. Davis, who's an astrophysicist who worked alongside the government and the Pentagon on this UFO program, has analyzed some of these materials and has said that so far these materials have not been able to be identified by anything we know of on Earth. Also mentioned in this piece is that Eric Davis met with the Department of Defense as late as March of this year to give them classified briefings of off-world vehicle materials retrieved from off-world vehicles. You know, in these situations, I think it's always worth listening to these highly trained pilots who, they've seen everything. They've seen combat over Afghanistan, Iraq. They are not given to hyperbole. But when you can hear them go on the record and talk about these craft that they're seeing flying at unbelievable speeds that would rip apart the human body, where they're yelling, "Oh my gosh, what is that? What is that?" They have seen it all. Let's listen to some of these pilots discuss what they saw over the California coast.
Commander David Fravor is a retired naval aviator who once saw something he could not explain, that science can't explain. We're honored to have him on tonight. Mr. Fravor, thanks so much for coming on. Tell us if you think this is being misinterpreted. According to the New York Times, the U.S. government has physical evidence of some sort of vehicle made not on this Earth. Is it what it sounds like?
Well, it sounds that way to me, Tucker. I just, I never want to speculate what the government truly has, but I would say there's stuff out there. I mean, the four of us that chased the Tic Tac in 2004 have attested to it multiple times that what we saw exceeded anything that we had in our inventory, far superior to the airplanes that we were flying in at the time they were brand new. So I would say, yes, there's something out there.
That is the bombshell report in the New York Times. If you like stories like this, please subscribe to the channel. Also, gently massage that like button and hit that little bell notification so you'll be notified as soon as we publish another video. Stay spooky, everyone. We'll see you next time.